same old trouble, villains always knocking at the door. Pretty pictures on the page, but nothing ever stays the same.
Thank you, Vandello, and welcome once again to Graphically Novel. My name is Josh Wasta, a.k.a. Fallout Fury, and with me, as always, is my hitman that comes to save the day.
Jen, he's doing it again.
I know. It's okay.
The partner that I don't want to have killed.
Wait, what?
It's fair.
so confused. Hopefully the lady that's going to save me this season, Miss Jennifer Howland.
You're so mean to me. You're so mean to me. That's all I heard for 3 seasons. I'm finally nice to you, and you're like, this works.
Yeah, I did. This is so much worse.
I'm here for you, Bear. I'm here for you. And I actually get the distinct pleasure of introducing our guest. And I am very pleased to introduce one of my dear friends, Rebecca Doyle. Becky, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the lovely invitation. It's always a pleasure to be in your company.
Oh, thank you.
So this season, we do something a little different every season, and in addition to being very nice to Bear. The thing that we did this season is we chose who our guests would be, instead of just kind of putting out the invitation saying, hey, everybody, this is what we're doing, and get a hold of us if you're interested. We kind of went through and looked at all of our friends that we wanted to have on the show and handpicked them. And Jen, you handpicked Becky.
I did.
For what reason? For The Kitchen, by the way, is what we will be doing today.
I picked Becky, one, because I really wanted Becky on the show, whatever episode it was going to be. But I really felt like The Kitchen was one of those sisters are doing it for themselves, movie and graphic novel. And I know my friend Becky, and I know she is a strong, independent woman that don't need no man.
Well, there's one thing I need a man for.
That's true. To get the jars on the top shelf.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm pretty tall, but yeah, I see your point.
So that is why I chose Becky. I also know that she has very insightful things to say. No pressure.
I've thought about this for at least 24 hours. So it's at least. You don't want more than that, because then I start building timepieces and we time travel, and it's longer than you probably want for your show. So
it becomes the new miniseries of The Stand.
There we go.
Where they do all the flashbacks. Not a fan.
Yeah, I'm a Star Trek fan, so yeah, flashbacks and time travel, I'm all about that.
You got a slingshot around the sun.
Yeah. It could happen.
Yeah.
Ooh, do I get to be Q?
Everybody wants to be. Yeah. So Becky, first time on the show, so give us a little overview. What is your history with comic book?
Well, now that you've asked, I have to tell you, I was a big, Archie's fan when I was a little kid.
Yay!
And then I went to California for a trip, and I went to a comic book store because the guy I went on the trip with was a comic book fan. And I bought a 3-part graphic novel called Kid Eternity. And I really loved it because the front covers were like one face when you put them all together. So I loved that. And I had that for a long time. And then I just didn't do that anymore because I ended up getting married and having children, and your life ends when that happens for a time. So that's been a very short history of comics. Although I do have many friends who are very into comics and graphic novels, I just never felt very comfortable with that genre of media because I'm an avid reader and I like to create the pictures in my head. And when I have to get the story from a picture, I'm not quite so eager to engage that way. I don't mind movies so much for that. I'm a big snob on acting and pictures. Like, I love the movie Heathers, but that's because I'm a creepy kind of person.
No.
So that's my background about comics and media of that sort. So I'm definitely going to give you the average person, not a comic nerd's point of view. And I also watched the movie as well. And I have some opinions about how women are represented in both of these stories.
Awesome.
So before we get in, I'm really interested in this opinion, and that it was something that I did want to talk about. Which do you feel represented women been better.
Well,
they're both problematic in their own ways.
No, yeah, right. I liked the little bit that they did in the movie of her trying to get a job and being told she can't because she's a mother. That was still going on in the 80s, actually, when I started working, which is only like 6 or 7 years after this. Well, yeah, I guess. I'm trying to think. But anyway, you basically, the only time you could get off work is if you said you had a kid that was homesick. That's the only way you could get a day off if you were working like a job that didn't have traditional hours, like if you were a waitress or bartender or whatever. That was the only way you could get off work is if you said you had a kid that was sick. My mom and I have talked about this. She said, how you had no idea how hard it was when I was raising you by myself after my divorce, because I wasn't allowed to have a credit card because either my father or my husband had to sign for it. You couldn't rent an apartment without things. You had, just a lot of things women were not allowed. I mean, you had to wear dresses to work if you worked in an office. You couldn't even wear a pantsuit. And if you did have a pantsuit, it had to have a skirt over it. And then when you got to work, you would take your pants off and wear your skirt. I mean, there were a lot of things that women were held to that men were not. So my issue with this story specifically is that women decided to be like men, and the whole thing with having a set of balls, it's just like, you know what, you didn't have to go there. You could have played the woman card and say a man could never give birth. They would never go through it more than once, so I don't know. And the fact, and I don't want to be a bitch about this, but the fact that the story was written by a man, kind of makes it suspect. It's like their fantasy of how women really are, or want to be. Like penis envy crap. I'm not buying it.
No, and yeah, it's funny that you brought up, especially women in business and things like that. Jen and I, very early in our relationship, kind of had a knockdown, drag out fight over high heels. I was in an office environment, and I came home and I was just like, it's the weirdest thing. And I'm like, keep in mind, I'm 11 years younger than Jen is. So I was born in 79, like the 90s were my growing up. And then the after 2000 was really my 20s. But I came home and I was like, why do women wear high heels anymore? Because the entire point of high heels is to like accentuate your ass. Like that is what, when you're wearing them, that is what it does to the body. And they're not comfortable. So in an office environment, isn't that just asking for harassment? Isn't that just, and we got into it like pretty heavy because again, I didn't understand the history and I didn't understand what was expected and how that's kind of a throwback today. I mean, if a woman wants to look that way, it's their choice, but it doesn't mean that everybody, that it's an open invitation. But again, it was the way that my mind works. It was very much an X does Y, which Y isn't supposed to be in this rigid system. So why are we?
Yeah, because men didn't have the dress code standards that women did. When I started working in Chicago in an office, not only was I required to wear a dress or a skirt, I had to have tights on or nylons on. I couldn't have bare legs.
That's true. And the only time that we were allowed to have bare legs is if we had open toe shoes, and we better have had a pedicure.
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting called into a manager's office, being called to the carpet because I wasn't wearing makeup. And I was working in a dental office, and I said, when you make the male members of our team wear makeup, I might consider putting some lipstick on. That's completely unfair. And the next time that you actually give me a compliment on the way that I look, I am going to file for harassment because it's inappropriate.
Yeah. And
the manager was female, and she had to work really hard to get to where she was. And she even changed her name on her business card from Elsie, because her name was Elsie, Elsie, to LC. So nobody would know she was a man. I wasn't a man, because she wanted respect. Now we're talking the 1999.
Yeah.
It's 20 years ago, 20 years ago,
Which is strange because 1980 was also 20 years ago.
Right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Right? When I was a freshman in high school. Right on. So, and we kind of get tunnel vision about, oh gosh, yeah, it was like that back then. And we can't have the same standards like if you watch an old TV show. But we need to get back to the kitchen, I guess. We're talking about See,
and yeah, this is kind of what we do on this show is we're talking about the kitchen, but we're also talking about the culture that surrounds it.
Right.
And we're talking about basically whatever comes to mind. I mean, I've been having conversations with people about, Jen and I have been watching on HBO, they have The History of Comedy, which is amazing. It is an amazing miniseries that CNN put together. And they just did their episode on people of color and their representation in comedy. Obviously, they did like a section on Jewish comedians, a section on Indian Pakistani comedians, and then they did the history basically of Black comedian coming up. And there was a good section for Bill Cosby. Like, how do you not include Bill Cosby in that? But every time I grew up on Bill Cosby tapes and whatever else, and every time I see it now, I'm like, oh man, bummer. But I don't do the same thing with Blazing Saddles, which arguably is so like the things that are approached in that are so much more problematic.
So much worse.
Like, you couldn't do it today. So something like The Kitchen that was put in that time period but written more recently doesn't get as much of a pass as like Blazing Saddles does, because Blazing Saddles was obviously a movie of its generation.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you had mentioned the female representation in the movie. What did you feel about the graphic novel, getting into it, especially being somebody that doesn't read graphic novels that often?
Sure. As story goes, I think the story was better in the graphic novel than it was in the movie. Absolutely. Although the graphic novel is completely more violent. I think they tell the story of the woman who's beat by her husband better in the movie than they do in the graphic novel. The transitions in both are very crappy. The transition from, I'm just a mom and I'm a housewife to I'm a fucking killer and I'm gonna shoot you in your head. It's like a there's no thought process. There's no consideration. And the fact that in the movie they make Kathy's father this nice guy who's totally not into it, and then Kathy in the novel, her father is a made guy and is a jagoff and totally ruins their family with his mob stuff, and that speaks to why her sister does the flip. I mean, these are completely different stories with the same name and kind of the same theme. So I'm telling you, the movie certainly would not influence me to read the graphic novel. The graphic novel may, if I liked it, would have piqued my interest to watch the movie. And then I would have been, this is crap, and turn it off, which I actually did. I couldn't finish watching the whole movie. And I was sitting there watching it with my mom because, she was in her 20s in the 70s, and 30s. So she, that was how she was a mom in 1977. My sister was born. So that would have been, and she's like, yes, that was true. The rest of it is crap. There's too much overacting in the movie. Like little Jackie or whatever his name was in the movie, he was a horrible actor. I was very disappointed and how cookie cutter these people were. She goes, there's probably better college made movies than what this was. So she had no problem with turning it off, even though it was like 10 minutes before the big reveal of all the things that happened. And I'm like, Mom, this is what happens. Even if it doesn't happen, then this movie definitely is crap compared to what I read in the graphic novel.
So I'll tell you at the end of the movie.
You said you weren't going to say the end of the movie.
The movie is fine. You can spoil the movie all day. It's the graphic novel.
Yeah. But yes, the end of the movie actually.
Tiffany Haddish,
who in the graphic novel, it's a completely different character. She's actually named Raven in the graphic novel, and she's the sister to Kathy, which is a much more interesting story. But you can tell that they obviously had to get any diversity at all about an Irish mob in the 1970s.
And yet they still made the black woman the bad guy.
Right.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Like, out of all of that, we got to get some diversity in here, but we're gonna stick with the same tropes.
But anyway, at the end, her and Kathy make amends and are running the gang together.
Well, they only make amends because Kathy.
They make a deal. They don't make amends.
They don't make amends. They make a deal because Ruby's all set up to kill Kathy.
Right.
And Kathy walks in with a mob of people. It's like, no, I knew you were going to do this. this. So if you want to go right now, we can do this, but it's going to turn into a bloodbath in here. And
so she doesn't.
Either one of us is going to walk away.
Right.
No.
Okay.
So
they both live at the end and continue to run Hell's Kitchen
together.
Yeah.
So
I'm so glad I turned it off.
There are a couple of things that I think the movie did better. Kind of speaking to those transitions, Becky, that you were talking about, like Claire's character, Elizabeth Moss' character. They do a better job of explaining how she turns into the hitter.
Yeah, definitely
in the movie,
yeah.
As opposed, because in the graphic novel, it's just like all of a sudden she's just killing people.
Yeah. Right. And it is the entire trajectory of who is killing who and who is involved in killing.
Right.
Is different, very different in the graphic novel. The graphic novel I enjoyed it way more. And the reason I did is I am a fan of organized crime movies, and just that genre is really fascinating to me. I don't know if in a past life, like as a gangster or something, but that's my mom talking. But it's
I think in a past life your mom was a gangster.
Probably. My mom's a gangster in this life.
You had to set him up.
Right. Carmen. That's right. Carmen's straight gangster. The graphic novel of The Kitchen reminded me, it was not nearly as good, but it reminded me of The Departed. A lot of its beats, a lot of the flow reminded me of The Departed. Again, I won't say anything is as good as The Departed, because The Departed was a great movie.
Yes, absolutely.
One of my favorites, and in fact, one of the very few Korean movies that I've ever watched, I've watched Infernal Affairs, which was the movie that Scorsese based The Departed off of, and it's even better.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll have to watch that.
But yeah, organized crime is big in my wheelhouse. I really like 1920s era gangster stuff. I really like period, like especially 60s, 70s gangster stuff, when you start talking about the intersections between entertainment and organized crime. So you get into like the Rat Pack and how they were in Vegas and everything that they did was basically watched and protected by the mob, and they were very careful not to step out of that. Anyway, I enjoy that genre. I feel the graphic novel did it much better. The movie, I would say the transitions, to me, the word that I came up with was jarring. It just was like, and we're doing what now?
Yeah. Well, and I felt like in the graphic novel, the way that the women got involved in, the business made more sense than in the movie. In the movie, it's like, oh, they won't help us. We don't have any money.
They won't give us money.
They won't give us money.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing. In the graphic novel, this is not much of a spoiler. Jackie, the person that's taken over the family business, is not nearly like an element at all. Like, they talk about him. He's not even on panel, I think, until the end of the graphic novel, because they basically say he's a jagoff. He's not going to do anything. And they go into business for themselves. They're like, boom, let's do it.
Right. But didn't you think it was interesting that no one interfered with them doing that?
I think that was to reinforce the point that Jackie couldn't run, because it's not a full like Irish mob organization in the graphic novel like it is in the movie. It's a small gang. Yeah. And then I don't know if maybe in the movie they thought people wouldn't understand that there were like 6-person gangs that had a 10-block neighborhood that were their own organization in the 70s, because everybody has this fascination with the like neighborhoods cut up into mobs.
Yeah, the greater mob as a whole, or there's all these different factions.
Becky, I've got a face that tells me that you have something on this.
I've got like 5 things going on in my head. Number one, when it comes to movies of a similar take, like Melissa McCarthy is known as a comedian. Adam Sandler with Uncut Gems was a much better movie. I loved that movie because I think that comedians can bring the depth of pain that just a regular actor could not.
Robin Williams in 1 Hour Photo.
Right. Well, my mom and I were talking about that just today. Okay.
Right.
So, or even Jim Carrey with The Truman Show. It's just, or who's the other one? The guy who played Batman. Anyway, so there's ways into there that just wasn't accessed with this movie. I don't even want to talk about the movie because I just feel like I'll never get that hour and a half back.
It does. It has 5.5 stars on IMDb.
It needs to
really?
Yeah.
It has like a 37% on Rotten.
Out of 10. Okay, I was like, wait a minute, no, that can't be right.
Yeah, it had to have been either way worse or way better to have made it worth my time. But the novel, for somebody who doesn't do graphic novels, it took me a while to learn how to read it. I also was looking at it digitally. I didn't have a physical book, and I'm kind of a book person. So that was a little bit of a learning curve, and I found it disjointed. And it's like, what is it trying to show me now? What is it trying to show me now? What am I trying to see now? What am I trying to get out of this? And because there were so many characters, it was hard, and the art wasn't very. I'm not used to reading art. I wasn't good at distinguishing. Okay, now what character is this? Which guy is this? Because the guys were all kind of fat and gross, and
they all looked very similar. The men looked very similar.
So it was different.
Ridiculously so.
Yeah. And I think that was intentional. The women were very different. You knew who the women were that the main characters were.
Sure.
Because it was Charlie's Angels.
But that's kind of hard to do with storytelling, especially if you're trying to tell the individual stories of these women and how these men, they feel about these men. And I kind of didn't get some of the endings and of vignettes. And I'm like, is this going to carry on to the next one? Do I have to care? So I guess this is exactly why this is not a genre that holds my interest. I really don't want to spend the time to find something in the genre that speaks to me.
Right. I can understand that.
Yeah.
I would recommend, if you are more of an audio person, listen to our podcast. See if there's something
if
that
anything piques your curiosity.
Yeah.
Especially if there's people on there that I know, like JR, Dan Schaefer.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Oh, JR's whole thing with Lock and Key. We also had a Stephen King podcast called the Dairy Public Radio that was on all in the same episode. So we had a wealth of knowledge about Stephen King and about just the history of Lock and Key and Joe Hill and everything else. And it was a really good episode. But when it comes to things like The Kitchen, you don't have to worry if it's setting up the other one. This is a one and done. This is an all-inclusive story just in one graphic novel. There are no
thank
other.
God. I was going to feel bad about going, no, I don't want to keep reading.
No, there's a different kind of question that I have at the end of this, because much like a lot of other graphic novels that we've done, this was a one and done. This is not something that continued afterwards. And it's also a DC Vertigo title, which a lot of the Vertigo titles are just kind of one and done, or at least they have their plan of it will only go X number of issues and then.
But for being a Vertigo title, for all the other Vertigo stuff that we've done, this is really at kind of the bottom of the list. Like, I don't know anything else that we've done that was Vertigo that wasn't better than this.
I can't think of that much that we've done that was Vertigo.
We've done like 2 or 3.
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. It scores higher with me just because I like that kind of story. I like 1970s organized mob,
Did you know that Ollie Masters, these are artists, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so it's just Ollie Masters.
Ollie Masters was the writer. Ollie Masters also wrote Sons of Anarchy.
That is making a lot of sense.
Yes, that does. That makes a lot more sense now.
He wrote Sons of Anarchy. And the movie, The Kitchen, the screenplay was written and directed by a woman.
Interesting.
That also makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
Especially with Sons of Anarchy, because that was one of those shows that I really enjoyed initially, and the more I watched, the more I was like, no, what are you doing? Why are you? No, stop.
Yeah, it's why I can't get Jenn to watch it, because she won't watch things in which people are making bad decisions.
And telegraphing how much they're going to do this really bad decision.
You're watching this slow downward spiral of just a large group of people making poor decisions in their lives. And unfortunately, I watched that one through to the end. I didn't do that with Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad pissed me off about a season or 2 in, and then I'm like, nope, we're done.
Becky, any examples of similar? Do you also have issues with bad decisions in media?
I do, actually. I was a big Johnny Depp fan for a while, and he got involved in some comic book thing, and I ordered it and I got it. And I'm trying to remember, I'm thinking it was The Gunslinger, but then it wasn't The Gunslinger. It was, or maybe it was, but it was about, instead of, it was like Excalibur, but as cowboys. So instead of a sword, you had a gun. And I thought it was a really great idea, but then it sucked and it was still a comic book and I didn't like it. So then I ended up selling them to half price books. So that was a bad decision on my part. I really think that maybe I'll get some Neil Gaiman graphic novel stuff because, I really like his stories and I like the way he writes and what he thinks. I did buy some stuff from Warren Ellis as well. Now that I'm thinking about, I've tried, right. But it's just never hooked me.
I mean, if you want something with lots of text, you could always read From Hell.
Oh my God.
That's Alan Moore. And yeah, it is very text heavy.
Or you could try some Warren Ellis.
Right.
Or you could try some Warren Ellis. You'd probably be a lot happier with it.
Every year I try to sit down. He did a series called Transmetropolitan. And the idea of the series is if you go 50 years in the future, and you basically have Hunter S. Thompson as a journalist in the future. Yeah, it's really good. Right now it's really difficult to read because he is a political journalist.
Sure.
And so when the comic starts, he has been in isolation for 5 years because he got too popular and he could handle it. So he ran off to the mountains because he, in the previous election, had dubbed who would become the president, the Beast. And it's this whole thing about, it has a great amount of Warren Ellis humor. It's what brought me to the dance with Warren Ellis. It's hard to read right now, but if you can get past, if you use it as an escapism, I'd highly recommend it. And then Neil Gaiman, I mean, if you don't want to jump fully into the whole Sandman thing, you can kind of dip your toe with Death. It's called Death, the Cost of Living, and it is
High Cost of Living.
And the idea is that once every 100 years, Death becomes mortal for one day to know what it feels like. And that graphic novel is her. There's two different Death ones, but that's the big starting one.
So it's like Q.
Yes, it is a lot like Q, but she is way less of a dick than Q is.
Wow. They're not doing omnipotent right then.
Yeah. She is Death because, the whole idea of the Sandman universe is all of these concepts have a personified. Death is the most compassionate of all of them because she is the closest to humanity, except for Destruction, who actually at one point just quits because he's like, no, the humans they're out of their fucking minds and I'm out. I'm just out. They don't need me.
They're good enough on their own.
Right, right. So, but anyway, that's now that we've delved into, if you want to get into comics and you are not a comic book person, those are the recommendations that I'd put out. But yeah, I don't know how much more we have to say about The Kitchen.
I mean, I had a kind of a love-hate relationship with it myself when I was reading it because I was a 6-pack in, and alcohol-soaked brain bear went, yeah, action, yeah, violence, yeah, kill some people, yeah, chicks are kicking ass, yeah, and then I got to the end of it, and I'm just like, how was this any different if they had just gender swapped everybody? Like,
right,
it like there was nothing. Like, by the time I got done, I'm like, yeah, it was fun while it lasted, and there's no more things.
It didn't make me feel anything.
Yeah.
I felt that way about, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if they would have hammered home more about, if you decide that you're going to be like the people that are oppressing you and you become the oppressor and you get to have the same experiences they have for good or bad. If they would have hammered that story home, that might have been a little bit more worthwhile.
Right.
And then we maybe would have gotten to see like that moment at the end where they're like, beating their own kid or something like that. And like, oh, wait. I just became the thing that I hated. Yeah. Like, then there might have been like a redeeming moment. But no, we didn't get that.
They also, on that note, not quite to that step, but they didn't get into what being in that violent world does to you.
Right.
Because especially in the movie, they were still like, oh, but I'm still a mom and I go home and I take care of my kid. But when I'm over here, I'm hitting somebody with the butt of my gun. And I'm like, it's you know what, Becky, I think to go all the way back, I think it's putting on the balls and taking off the balls.
Yes.
It's kind of what they were trying to portray.
It was in the movie, especially, it was like mental whiplash, like seeing them go from one to the other.
Well, and I can always tell, so we watched the movie and I was okay with the movie because, again, if nothing else, it's an organized crime movie.
Right.
Like, okay, cool. It's popcorn. It's bubblegum for my brain, whatever. But the three of us watched it together. And when it was done, normally we at least are like, okay, here's a couple thoughts, but we'll save it for the podcast, especially if it really hit us. We're like, oh, I want to say so much, but we'll wait till the podcast. I think there was like 30 seconds of silence. Then one of you was like, what are we watching next?
Yeah.
Nice. It's true. I mean, the only thing that I found attractive in the movie was the Elizabeth Moss hitman kind of training romance thing, because it reminded me a lot of a David Lynch movie.
Yes.
Well, there was that they tried a little bit with Melissa McCarthy to get that back and forth between I'm a gangster, but I want to, I've got these kids that I got to take care of when her daughter got snatched. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, you're almost there. Yeah. You're almost there. You're not really doing it right. Okay, well, what are we watching next?
I thought, so not to spoil much from the graphic novel, because I still would recommend it to people, but in the movie, they took two specific relationships, not necessarily romantic relationships. One is romantic, one is a mentor-mentee relationship, and they combined them in the movie.
Yeah.
And they would have been much better left apart, because for one of them, for the one that is a romantic, there's a choice that is made throughout that, and at the end of that choice, it means something. Yeah. And the mentor-mentee actually at one point, is called out, and it's like, no, she's like a sister. Like, it's not romantic.
Absolutely not a romantic.
Went out of its way to point out that it's not a romantic relationship. In the movie, combining them muddled them and made them both not worth it.
And wasn't the romance between Raven and the mob guy?
Yes.
So it was they even swapped characters on who the romance had.
Right. Yeah. It was character progression for two different characters in the graphic novel, and in the movie they just dumped it all on Elizabeth Moss. Again, leaving Tiffany Haddish with nothing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, Elizabeth Moss is excellent, and she definitely was great. I think that they didn't want to give up Melissa McCarthy's genuine likability. So with her being quote unquote the face, that worked really well. But they needed to give I really didn't understand the storyline they wrote in for Ruby. I didn't understand what was going on there, because all you had was that one conversation in the movie with her mother and her across the kitchen table about the money. And I beat the soft heart out of you, or whatever that scene was. Because you didn't really get a chance to know her beforehand. Whereas the other people, you could really see what happened. You didn't know who Ruby was before her husband went to jail.
Right. Well, and I feel like you're very spot on there, because I feel like they're like, okay, we need some diversity in this. And that's great, because then we can use that whole like biracial in the 70s couple storyline.
Right, but it was shoehorned.
And it was not done well. It was. I see.
It was lazy.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It was very lazy.
Absolutely, it was lazy.
It could have been a lot better.
Right, because, first of all, if you're going to increase it from a gang to the Irish mob in the 1970s, do you think anyone, even the son of one of the bosses, isn't going to suddenly have, before the wedding can happen, that lady ends up in a trunk somewhere?
Sure.
I mean, you're not being realistic until you tell me, like, she was smart enough to have something on them, or she had the capability, or even he helped her, he gave her some information, or he was blackmailing his family, something. Yeah. Because it's obvious the family did not like her. It's obvious the family did not want her in the family. And if you're the Irish mob in the 1970s, especially at the level that you're portraying in this movie, she isn't. She isn't part of your
She's
family.
Not just accidentally there because your son decided to, marry a black woman. That doesn't happen. Like, they would just beat the hell out of him and off her.
Right.
Well, the other thing that
now, if they don't want it,
right, and the other thing that I thought was completely, like, you want this storyline in here, but the mother-in-law was the only one who didn't accept her. Like, everyone else was like, okay, fine, dear, this is, and the women were like, okay, how are we going to work together? It's like, none of those people had any prejudice. None of them were racist. They're all, it's Irish mob. Yeah. They're jagoffs. In this movie, they're stereotypically, I don't know. I didn't get that.
Another thing about the Irish mob, not one of them had an Irish dialect. Not one. There was not one Irish dialect.
They didn't even try at a crappy Irish accent or anything.
You're not even getting a half-assed Jack Nicholson from The Departed,
right?
Again, love that movie, but that accent what are you doing, Jack? It's like he's almost there, and he's like, fuck it, I'm Jack Nicholson. You can take it or leave it. Like,
Right.
Didn't Kevin Costner do a bad one in Robin Hood too, or something like that?
oh, that was a
Yeah.
bad English accent.
That was
really
bad.
That was
That was
real
really
bad.
Right.
Yeah,
You know
it's
what I would really like to see is a female version of like some badass, Irish guys. That's what I did not get.
Right.
I don't care what time period you put it in or what reason they're doing it. I want to see some badass Irish chicks kicking some fucking ass. That's what I want. That
Sounds like a great movie.
Let's do it.
Let's see that movie.
Well, it was Scottish, and it was called Brave.
There you go.
Again with the cartoons. I'm sure I haven't seen that yet, so I'm sure I have something to say about it, and I'll have to watch it. And tell
It
you.
was actually very, very well done. Brave was very well
It's
done.
a Disney movie.
It is a Disney movie, but it's also the like, you have to marry one of these people. And she's like, really? So you're having a contest to see who has to marry me? I'm going to enter that contest. And if I win, I don't have to marry anybody.
Yeah,
Go fuck yourself.
It's the story of Atalanta from Free to Be You and Me.
Yes. All right. Anything else to say on the kitchen?
Nope.
Okay.
They should have stayed in the kitchen.
Mm.
Ooh.
You know what would have made
She
it
can
really
say that
good?
because she's a woman.
Yeah.
What would have made it really good if Daredevil were there.
Daredevil.
Oh, there you go. No,
1970s. So,
I'd rather have Spawn.
well, she hasn't. We have not done Spawn yet. Spawn is also
We'll
Hell's Kitchen.
get there.
Okay.
Yeah. So Becky, I think you answered this a little earlier, but reading this graphic novel, has it encouraged you to read more graphic novels or seek any out?
Not specifically this one. I want to like it. I think that that's just my own brain wanting to connect with my friends on something they really enjoy. And that's the only reason I keep going back to it and trying to find something that sparks interest. But I can't. I mean, I it's like everybody had seen Firefly and they were saying shiny, and I didn't get any of the references when that was happening, and I didn't get to watch Firefly for at least a decade. And then when I watched it, I'm like, this kick ass. And then I started to be like shiny and that's waiting on a train that don't come, and Captain and something, stuff like that. And so I
can
really
stand to
want
hear some more.
What?
I could stand to hear some more.
Right, exactly. So that's why I keep going back to it. And so I'm going to take your recommendations to heart, and I will listen to your podcast now that I know that. And it's lovely.
I think since it is 'tis the season while we were recording this, I think you may just have a copy of Death, the High Cost of Living show up at your house.
It was nice to receive the actual but it only was like the first episode of the physical book.
Yeah, sorry, that was my bad.
No, and I couldn't, no, it wasn't your bad. I didn't really see it for an offer, to be honest with you, like the full thing. So I got the digital copy. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Because I'm trying to slim down my belongings anyway. So everything's going digital, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
We recently did that too. We were both book hogs in a big bad way, but we found recently that Jen and I both really like digital copy. And so we went through all of our books and we're looking at basically one by one, is it available digitally? Can I get it easy if I want to read it? And if that was the case, Half Price Book Spot.
Right
and
on.
we did 4 trips and it ended up being like $350. Like we're
Sweet Jesus.
Yeah.
I guess I can't talk because I have probably right now sitting for half price books and video games, etc., and everything else. Like I have a box of movies. I have a completely separate box of video games. And I haven't even gotten around to books yet. I probably have 2 or 3 boxes of books that I'm going to be doing the same thing with.
See, and that was Bear's impetus on movies that got us into the digital realm.
Yeah, that because I got
everything.
sick of moving my entire DVD collection, and I was just like, you know what? I've got a Vudu account, and I can put most of these movies into my Vudu account for like $2 a title. Guess what? We're gonna do this. I'm sick of moving these around.
Okay, so the question for this panel is, has this made you interested in Ollie Masters as a writer? This is the first time we've run into him. Obviously, as Jen mentioned, he wrote wrote Sons of Anarchy. I have not looked into if he does any other comic or has done any other comics, but if one pops up,
he has. I have a list.
Are you interested?
No, not really. Although he did do a run of comics featuring Wonder Woman called Sensation Comics. No, I'm more interested in Ming Doyle.
Somewhere Kat just perked up and is just like, huh, what?
Yeah.
And is going to look this up and tell us if we need to even bother.
Ming Doyle being the artist?
Being the artist. There were several images in this graphic novel that I thought it wasn't 70s as much. It reminded me so much of 80s, like kind of Nagel-esque, but there were a couple of panels that or alternate covers in the collected graphic novel that I thought were really great, and a lot of the art I like a lot of the symbolism, so I'll be looking out for that artist, definitely.
Fair.
It wasn't, like I said, I was a 6-pack in when I started reading this. And it was an okay ride, but I don't know, like, it'd have to be a title that, really kind of jumped out at me for me to
established title.
Yeah.
It couldn't be like a new IP.
Like not knowing what the kitchen was, like I wouldn't have gone after this of my own, if I had read something else of his. It's just like, I don't even know what that is.
I'd probably have the idle curiosity, especially if it was on sale on like Comixology or something. If it was a new graphic novel by him for $5, I'd pick it up. I'd add it to my tablet and probably not get to it for a couple of years, especially if we're still doing this show. I have a lot more homework.
I mean, like I said, it's just one of those rides that kind of reminded me of like a not quite so good Bad Boys. One of those movies you put on in the background just for the explosions and the bangs and the like the cool one-liners, except for it didn't have any cool one-liners.
Yeah.
Right. It made me want to go and rewatch things that did it better. So now I have a hankering to watch like Miller's Crossing or Goodfellas or The Departed or just something that did it better.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking up things, reviews about the movie and reviews about the graphic novel. The thing that kept coming up was widows. Apparently there's another movie that came out around the same time that was about 3 widows that did a bank heist, and it was much better done and the story was better told. So I think I might check that movie out, and maybe you want to too.
I think we will. Yeah. Definitely, because I am interested in this premise. I think it had a lot of the movie, especially. Right. Yeah. Right. But the movie still had a lot of potential. It's the idea of 3 women who, for one reason or another, in an era where, like we talked about, they weren't encouraged to take care of themselves. Somebody was supposed to take care of them because they were supposed to be taking care of the kid. What do you do when you're put in that situation? And in this situation, it was they can't earn. So they have to. So they have to earn, Interesting. It is very, what's that?
I'd like to close with a little bit of trivia from the movie.
From the D?
From the movie, yes. I'm ignoring you. So when referring to a site for a planned convention center project, Alfonso Cuarón mentions some millionaire's kid a little shit for brains. The project would become the Javits Center, and the millionaire's kid is Donald Trump.
I was going to say, I knew it as soon as they said that.
I know.
And I was just like, oh, man, he's got his freaking whatever and everything. Oh.
Ruin my escapism. Well, Becky, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun, and I think we talked a lot about a subject that, as we found out, we don't, there wasn't a lot there to talk about.
We're way more interesting than the stories were, to be honest.
It's true.
Well, we'll see about having you back in season 5. Maybe we can get you to fully watch something and read another graphic novel for us.
I absolutely enjoyed putting my brain in a new place. Learning makes my brain feel good, and I like when my brain feels good because a lot of times, brains don't necessarily feel good. So thank you for helping the squirrels.
Absolutely.
Keep that treadmill running.
I want to see Bear for a minute because I don't know if I know you.
I don't think you've met Bear. There's Bear.
All right. All
right. Well, join us next time when we will be doing Hellstrom. We were going to be doing Old Guard, but that got moved. So Hellstrom will be our next with Mr. Justin Stacy. We will be finishing the show today, or at least Jen and I. I don't know how far Bear is, but until next time, take it away, Vandello.
Do at the door. Pretty pictures on the page, but nothing ever stays the same. Do 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 do. Come at me, and I'll show you something you ain't never seen before. Right or wrong, oh can't we all just get along? My mask is no different than yours. Pretty pictures on the screen, but nothing's ever as it seems. Do 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 do. Hero or villain, loved or